Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans,
And I'm Robert Winters.
and we're still here in our Zoom places, right?
Still
Our
zooming
Zoom
away here.
windows. Yeah, we're zooming
Yeah.
away.
And let me just say the very last
Yes.
little thing here
Oh, about
about
what we just were talking about. Yeah.
yeah. So there is this issue of the housing choice and whether 2/3 majorities
Right.
or simple majorities. So
Right.
so it's basically been referred to a committee. They're going to have a discussion, but I think ultimately the city solicitor is going to come down on it one way or the other. But that in itself is not the final word, and they may actually take an interpretation from the state regulating body to say
Mhm.
what is really true here. So
Okay.
so it's a little up in the air, but anyway, so there you go. So some
All
of the
right.
items that have
Yeah.
been happening, what happened, I think, was at the previous meeting, right?
March 29th. Yep.
29th, had to do with matters related to
DPW
solid
and
waste,
trash and
DPW,
yeah.
composting, whatever.
Single use packaging.
Right. So it was actually
Plastic packaging.
it was like a whole parade of items,
It
really.
was. And I thought
And
it would generate a lot of public comment,
and
and
it
it
didn't.
didn't.
It
No.
didn't. I guess that's not in the real serious controversial category these
I
days,
think the
right?
missing middle thing has taken over the
Kind
conversation.
of taking the
Yeah.
wind out of everybody's sails there.
Yeah.
So actually this was on top of the commercial composting
Yes, which I have
pilot
some thoughts
proposal.
of, but we can talk about that later because that's still, I've got,
Yeah,
yeah.
but thing is, in
Yeah,
rapid
I know.
fire, we had commercial composting
Well, but wait,
proposals.
but to be more specific, that was a proposal put forward by an outside group to the city.
Right.
The the items that were awaiting report
These were
responses.
responses from the city.
Right.
Yes.
So it's a little different.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's
Oh, I know. It's all I know. Yeah, I was surprised to see that commercial. Not surprised, but oh, I didn't know this was happening. It's a very thorough report. And one of the president of this organization did give public comment and mentioned three cities that are doing like Portland, Denver, and San Francisco. Of course, I looked them up immediately, and I did not see any indication that they pay for any kind of commercial compost. If nothing else, people are paying for whatever. So
right.
I'm trying to get more information about that because
Lurking.
we always compare ourselves to other cities and say, oh, but they're doing it. But let's look at the details of all of these things.
So one little
Yeah.
facet, and then I'll say no more on it, is that
Yeah.
was that part of this seems to be driven also by the fact that, especially during the COVID period,
Oh
there are
yeah.
costs associated with some of this waste disposal. So if the city were to be picking up the tab on this, it's kind of a little bit of a bonus for some of the small businesses and
But you
larger
know what the
businesses too.
pickup would be? It's 3 to 4 times a week for
3 to
compost.
4 times a week, right? So
That's
so you're
nothing
asking a
small.
lot.
That's right.
Right. So you're asking for significant costs and presumably for the city to be picking up the tab. So
Plus, the whole thing about going, should it be on a wastewater treatment versus farm? There's a lot of
right.
things to deal with this. I just hope this, I mean, I'm kind of doing this on my own and in consultation with Mike and stuff from DPW because
I noticed that for the agenda for the recycling advisory committee meeting coming up next week,
Oh
that
yeah,
there
that's going
was
to be
a
good. Yes.
bit of a presentation on
Yes.
why do we do things the way we do.
Yes.
And right now,
Yes.
when we get back, I don't know if there's a date certain yet when we're going back onto the organics collection for the
Right. They're
city.
hoping, yeah, which, if you really want to, we've been able to do it for months and months and months. But at Danahy, you go to DPW 24 hours, 7, it's open.
Or you compost in my backyard.
Well,
That
you
too.
can do that, but I like to put in, meat stuff, cheese, whatever.
Sure.
You're right, but you have to have a backyard, number one.
Right. But for the large volume
Yes, they're going to
operation
get back to that,
citywide,
right.
so you're right. And the question is what's ideal composting? Is it done in
Well,
windrows
it's the
with
digestion of food. How do you do that? All right.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
and where does it? Yeah, it's
right. And currently it's merged with a wastewater
which unfortunately, did you
treatment.
see the article in the Chronicle about this, about
I
the
think I
commercial
did.
composting? And the writer used the word sewage plant versus wastewater treatment plant. Big difference. I'm sorry,
Right.
just the language. They should have
Yeah.
been a little more.
Yeah.
And there's lots of studies. The Conservation Law Foundation had a talk thing last week that I was able to participate in via Mike told me about it. And boy, they were really down on Cambridge because they don't like the whole toxic chemical, and now you've got PFAS, but there's many things to look at here.
Right.
So,
I'm just,
yeah.
at some basic level, happy that we're doing a little trash talking though,
Oh, yeah.
because this is something that does affect everybody,
Right.
and people should learn a little bit more about it.
Right. And the other thing
And
was the amount, new receptacles being bought for
that's right. So one of
households.
the
So that's
items on
another thing.
on the meeting of the 29th was that the city
Right.
is planning to
Right.
expend some serious dough
Yeah.
to actually purchase rubbish containers for
Mhm.
residents across the city. All right. Which
Well,
was a
other
proposal.
cities have done that. In other words, don't call it pay as you throw, but this is what,
You
so
know,
it's unclear if you can use your, whatever, yeah.
right. I mean, part of the argument for this
Yeah.
is rodent
Oh, yeah.
infestation reduction, to be sure. Another one is just in terms of standards for the rubbish collection,
Right, because
if
there's
you
the
have,
trucks to, right, to
yeah,
have,
if you have,
yeah.
right, I mean, there already are kind of limitations on how big a barrel you were allowed to put out there so that the laborers were not breaking their back lifting
Right.
it, whatever. So some of this is about standardization,
Yes.
and it actually came as a bit of a surprise. I didn't actually think that the city was actually going to pick up the cost and do that.
Oh, I always knew that was in the works. Yeah.
Yeah.
The state has contracts, and that's what, Belmont, Somerville issued containers, Brookline. I mean, Brookline also, residents, most of them pay for their trash. That's the other thing. We keep bringing up all these other cities. I've looked it up. Portland and Berkeley, it's a separate assessment for the residents. We get a lot of city services here that we don't really pay for. You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, I mean, we pay for them, but we pay for it through our real estate taxes,
Well,
right?
whatever. I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
They haven't been
really,
turned into fees.
I just
Yeah.
hate it when people, and the other item was the single-use plastics. And, one of the counselors said, oh, but Canada's banning single-use plastics and Virginia's ban. Well, look at the details. Virginia, first of all, hasn't had any plastic bans, no plastic bag bans, no polystyrene. So they're just starting to do that. Canada, if you look at the items, it's the same as the list that DPW has proposed. And they're not banning tops, and they're not banning water bottles because they feel that those are recyclable. So let's look at the details before we get all this I hate when we're compared to other places. They do that with the municipal broadband. They do it.
There's like different arenas.
I'm frustrated.
The consciousness that you find in different arenas, like
I know.
general public consciousness is sort of all over the map. When we were on this recycling advisory committee, and you've actually stayed much more in touch with all the issues than I have.
I know.
But for years I was the recycling hotline. I had to have
because
the
you were
answers.
the compost man. I know.
Well, I was the compost man, but I was also the recycling hotline for a number of years.
Oh,
so when people around the city would call up, they would get me, and I had to have the answers. So I kind of was important, and I had to be knowledgeable.
Robert, do you remember the Seinfeld episode where Kramer pretended to be the movie hotline?
Yes, absolutely. That's right.
Yeah. You were the recycling. Now it's all on an app.
It's
which
true.
You don't have because you don't have a cell phone.
Right, but it's funny.
You have an iPad.
I've allowed myself to become at least a little more ignorant, just for the sake of relaxation.
All right.
But anyway, it was. I thought it was very great that there's all this talk, but I remember when we were on the advisory committee learning a lot of things about things that the average person might think would be the more environmentally appropriate thing to do, which really wasn't the most appropriate thing to do. I remember Rob Gogan doing this demonstration with
the styrofoam
plastic cups too, just to show that when you took away the paper, it was a lot of plastic already in a paper cup.
Right.
Because otherwise it would just deteriorate instantly. You learn a lot when you actually get into the details.
And also, and I have made it my, I like to educate so I listen to a lot of industry webinars and people actually doing within the infrastructure to know what is possible, what isn't. So I've learned a lot. So when we just throw out these things, biodegradable or compostable, or that term I told you, wish cycling, or
wish cycling,
I mean,
actually I remember one of the great little moments of realizations, like the light bulb going off in my head, when Sumner Martinson, who used to he was one of our original recycling people, but he worked for the state Department of Environmental Protection and Solid Waste Matters, right? So he was sort of a major figure for the state in this
Yes.
regard. And he was giving an account about, people who were talking about, setting up programs, to collect this and to collect that here. And and somebody just said, "You're not recyclers, you're collectors." Right? Recyclers are the ones who are taking the material from the blue bins
And doing
and
something with it.
remanufacturing
Right.
things and actually turning them into things.
Right.
That's the
Right.
recycling part
Right.
of it.
That's true.
And everybody was so self-satisfied with they were
Yeah.
expanding programs to collect this, that, and the other thing. And so few people were actually thinking about what then,
Yeah.
I
No,
mean, I
that's a
remember
good
being
point.
kind
Yeah.
of crestfallen, if that's the correct word, when
Mm,
I found out that a lot of the glass was no longer being
I
manufactured
know.
into
Yeah, I know. 'Cause the
containers.
factory that, yeah, right. I know.
Right. So the thing is it was not always what you
It's,
expected. Sometimes it
no,
was better than you thought, and sometimes it was worse than you thought, but you learned a lot, and it was really
right.
worth
And we
thinking
just
about it.
we can't focus on the minutia,
Right. I
you
worry
know?
sometimes that
Yeah,
the elected officials are not,
yeah, yeah,
they're either not fully educated about the realities of
yeah.
recycling industries and
Mhm.
what's feasible, what's current,
Right,
what may one day be feasible but isn't
right,
currently feasible,
right.
whatever, and what they think they know, you
I
know,
know.
because it ain't always what's true,
I know.
and then they're making decisions, or or giving grief to the manager. I mean, it seems to me like there's a kind of a growing sense of micromanagement on this particular city council in
I,
matters
it,
relating to
it just
environmental.
irritates me. I just feel like, what world are we living in? Because I live in a certain part of the world now, and certain part of the city where, people are just putting together, step by step, and, they're not worrying. I mean, I'm glad there are people that are dealing with these issues, but let's be realistic. We all don't have driveways. We all don't have ability to put an electric thing in. We don't have, we can't, we can't afford to, be vegan or whatever, because, whatever. I shouldn't
Right.
equate price with that, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's like, we live in a bubble, some of us here,
Right. And and like some of us also think that people should have choices, and they
Yeah.
can choose to do things
You,
magnificently or just pretty damn good. And
you try to
that's pretty
reduce the
good, damn
harm,
good.
reduce and reuse. That's basically was the message from
Yeah,
DPW, that
actually I
reduce and
liked the
reuse.
message
Yeah.
from DPW on these
You're
matters.
not, I mean, to think we're going to get rid of all plastics, think about your hospitals. Think about, I was just reading something that cars, you know how many cars are made? I mean, of course, oh, right. We have to get rid of cars anyway, but you know what I'm trying to say. I shouldn't have even brought that up. But so much we depend on it. So we need to find a way to reuse it, recycle it, turn it into, I'm not totally against waste to energy. I'm not totally
Right.
against a lot of things that maybe can be possible. I just think we need to face realities. That's all.
Right.
So let's
Now,
go to
actually,
something else.
well, actually, I'll give one last little
Yeah,
connected thing. It was
yeah.
last night's council meeting. There was one, normally it would be an item nobody would ever even talk about. It had to
What?
do with an expenditure, an appropriation order for money to buy a new bucket truck, I think, for Public Works. I think, basically, I
A
think it's the one that
bucket
just,
truck.
I
Oh,
think it's the one
oh,
that,
okay.
that it's, bucket truck could mean two things in the
Right.
Public Works establishment.
Yeah.
It could mean one that clears out the storm drains, but that's
Oh,
usually
okay.
called a
Yeah.
clamshell.
I think they meant the one that goes up in the
And I
air,
think a
right?
bucket truck is usually the one that goes up like an
Yeah,
actual holding a
yeah,
human being up
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And then Councilor Nolan just went on at length about,
It's
and
electric.
she
Yeah,
actually exercised
yeah.
her charter right on the
Oh, that's right.
appropriation,
She needs to look at,
because,
yeah.
they said, well, this is like a biodiesel one, and it apparently got okayed by the environmental panel that sort of decides
Right.
on the
But it
righteousness of.
wasn't good enough.
It
Yeah.
wasn't good enough for Councilor Nolan because she knows what's best. I said, are we really reaching this level of micromanagement now, where councilors are basically going to be sort of checking out the specs of every vehicle purchased by Public Works, whether it's sufficiently righteous?
It's an
You know,
election year, Robert.
I know it's an election year, but the thing is, you got to sort of know your job a little bit here.
Yeah.
Set the policy. That's your job as a city councilor. But
I mean,
you kind
yeah,
of have to
I think it was okay to question it maybe, but to
raise the
charter write it,
issues,
I don't
provide
know. Yeah.
information, sure, and if you can help educate the staff, that's great, but come on, ease up a little
So,
bit.
this was an expenditure, meaning it's something had to be approved by the council?
appropriations do have to be,
Appropriations,
I mean,
okay, so
normally
that's,
what they do is
yeah,
and it's coming up soon,
yeah,
in a month, is there's the budget. So the manager puts forth the budget, they hold hearings, whatever, the council technically has to approve the budget, right?
yeah,
And then as long as it's in the budget, you're good to go. But then during the year, there are these appropriations that come up where the
yeah,
manager says, well, we need to spend $130,000 on this, or 1.8 million on that,
yeah.
or sometimes a big thing like, well, we're gonna buy a softball field in West Cambridge,
Oh, right, yeah,
because a deal came along that we just couldn't pass up, and we need the council approval. Manager can't just spend the money.
right.
And it has to transfer the money from either free cash or whatever, or from one piece of the budget to another, that the council still has to technically approve it. But, and for the most part, these things are just pro forma, right? But,
Yeah.
you know, anyway,
Yeah, it relates to like the curb cut situation where you have DPW writing it off, you have historical commission writing it, but it's like, let's charter write this because we don't want to, whatever.
right.
I don't know.
And by the way, another thing
Oh,
this would be a topic that we could really go on about, is that
uh-oh.
when as part of the discussion about the boards and commissions last night,
Oh, yes.
at least I believe two counselors somehow were trying to weave in the question of charter change, as if
Oh,
to
yeah.
say, we're not happy with the fact that the manager makes appointments and we can't veto them or force the manager to pick the people we want. So in
Oh,
other words, there's at least two counselors, and I'm not going to name their names here, right? But
when did this occur?
this
Maybe I
was
was,
last night, and when they were
yeah.
having the issue over the appointment to the member
Oh,
of
with the
the
planning
Board of
board.
Zoning
Okay,
Appeals.
yeah.
As if to say,
Mhm.
well, in other cities and under other charter forms, these things are subject to the approval of the elected officials, right? And I said, boy, I don't like that road we're heading down. I mean, if this is
Mhm.
what the discussion about charter
Yeah,
review and
yeah,
potentially charter
yeah,
reform or charter change is going to come
yeah,
down to,
yeah.
is just basically finding a way so that elected officials, with limited expertise in matters,
Mm.
can basically politicize every single thing. Is that really what we want? It's not what I want. And
Does any government body, municipal function that way?
yes, some do.
Yeah,
There's different forms of government. There's strong leader, tough guy.
yeah, right.
There's Somerville's form, which I think there may be some approval of some of these things.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, for example, on the school committee side, if you were going to be hired in the school department, ultimately the school committee had to make appointments. Right. So the superintendent could say, well, we're going to make this person here the principal or whatever, but the school committee had to give the okay. Education reform around 1993-ish or something, I could have the date wrong, basically said, no, can't do that no more. That's terrible. We have to basically, you hire the superintendent is in charge of certain things. You're in charge of budgets and whatever, ultimately with the school committee, but you cannot play like the little marionette, having the
Mhm.
superintendent make sure you hire the person who held your signs in the last election campaign,
Right.
cannot be somehow, made a gym teacher at such and such a school, because that sort of thing used to happen,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, patronage. Yeah, which can
Yeah,
still happen. I mean, it does.
yeah, and
Yeah.
people, some of these current crop of elected officials don't seem to understand that in many respects that is inevitable if you go down the road that they seem to be wanting to go down.
Mhm.
There was a few years ago, there was something, it was actually the car loan petition that wanted to make the city council give them the authority for the granting of special permits.
Oh,
And
what? Oh, I don't remember
oh
that.
yeah, right. So right now that authority is given to the planning board, so the conditions for special permits are decided when zoning is established by the city council, but ultimately the granting of the special permit
Should be the
is done by the
planning.
planning
Yeah.
board, right? And one person, again, I will not name names, pointed out, I said, well, if you pass this petition, by the way, that petition went down in flames early,
I
thank
hope so.
God. But
God.
and this is no flies on Councillor Carlone. I don't think
Yeah,
that's what he wanted. He didn't want to do something terrible. It's just
yeah,
that if you
yeah,
transfer that authority in that particular way, the consequences could have been dire. For
yes.
example, I mean, somebody pointed out, I think this is correct, that if a granting of a special permit was subject to approval by the city council, and you have issues with campaign contributions from major developers, can you imagine what those
Yeah,
contributions would look
I know.
like if in
Yeah,
fact,
yeah.
sweetening the pot for counselor
It is.
so-and-so? Well, we'll just combat that by making it illegal and whatever. You will find ways in which the corrupting influence of money
Yeah,
would get to
well,
would work that way. So
yeah,
I'm much happier ceding that authority to a panel with
yep.
specific expertise in
Doesn't
that.
have a political, they don't have to be elected.
They really
Right,
aren't. The
right,
planning board is not a
right,
political body.
right.
Well, I mean, some members are
Yes,
trying to be a little political, but
yeah,
that's a whole nother matter right now.
yeah. Wow.
So anyway, so
Oh, boy.
so
So
anyway, a lot of that's going. It's been very interesting what's going on now. There was one other thing I was going to mention.
about
Again, I
last
don't.
night, last
Uh,
night?
no,
This is,
not last night,
oh,
but
oh,
I was keeping track of the emerging candidates, right?
oh, right.
And I also put up, who's raising
Yeah,
money, whatever, just to kind of get an early view of it all. And I don't want to obsess upon it. I try not to obsess upon it too much. But it was interesting how there was a flurry of candidates who emerged before the turn of the year, and then it was just nothing,
yeah.
right? And it's been sort of like that, but some of the candidates that did emerge, most notably Theodora Skiatis, has raised boatloads of money,
Really?
right? Like almost $20,000 now.
Wow.
Is like, so this is not peanuts.
Right.
So that now the sort of the big fundraising candidates, the ones who seem to be wanting to drive hardest to the hoop, are Zondervan, McGovern, and
Right.
Skiatis.
Interesting.
That's just so far. We're just in early April though, folks. So
They have to declare what, by July 31st or something?
no, the
Oh.
election commission actually did officially sign off on the election calendar. So and it's pretty
Okay.
much never changes every 2 years.
Okay.
So July 1st is the first
July
day
1st.
you can pick up nomination papers.
Oh, okay.
And normally they would be due by July 31st, but
I
that's
guess
on a
that's what I meant.
weekend. So I think it
see.
gets pushed to like August
Okay.
2nd or 3rd or
I
something
see.
like that, the following Monday, right? So basically you get a month to gather your minimum 50. And of course, the wise candidate never gets just about 50. You always
Right.
have a buffer just in case some are
Can
disqualified.
you sign more than one candidate?
No, well, you can, but whoever turns in the signature first
I see.
is
They
credited
keep
for it.
track of
So,
that. I see.
right.
Okay.
So, if you
You
were
should know
to,
that. Yeah.
yeah, so you want to be a little careful.
Right.
You should always, when you're gathering signatures, say, have you signed for anyone else?
Right.
And hopefully they're honest about that. But you
Right.
can turn in at most 100 signatures,
I see.
and you got to give at least 50.
So have all the incumbents
No,
declared?
there's so far, there's some who have made very clear they are seeking reelection.
Zondervan, McGovern.
Yes, and a few
Carlone,
others.
too, yeah.
Carlone, very much, yes.
Yeah.
And others are clearly running for reelection, as evidenced by significant fundraising.
Okay.
I dare say Sabrina Wheeler is very much up there, but many of the other incumbents haven't really been raising money at all. And sometimes you might think, well, maybe they're just not going to run again.
No, I
But
wouldn't think
sometimes
that.
it's just
It's
they're waiting.
They don't want to deal with that right now. Yeah.
And they don't want to deal with it right now. So,
Right.
but it's not that shocking sometimes when there's a year where somebody who you thought was going to run who said, I'm tired of this. And it wouldn't surprise me if in the wonderful world of the pandemic,
Yeah.
where somebody said, boy, this has been an exhausting couple of years. I think I'd rather just go and, plant flowers,
Yeah. Well,
so it wouldn't shock me if there was an incumbent or two who left, and and we'll see.
it would shock me if there'd be more than one. Even one, I'm only thinking of maybe one person, but who knows?
Well, sometimes it's and then sometimes it's the people you think are going to not run are the ones that do continue to run.
Yeah. Right.
And the ones who, like when Kathy Bourne called it quits after 5 terms, so she served 10 years on the
5
council.
terms. Okay.
She said, hey, I got a lot of other things I want to do with my life. So I'm not running for reelection. And she went out, as a total winner.
Yeah.
And several years later, she was appointed to the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority.
Right.
And I think she's currently the chair. And, so she's really, dedicating.
I would think all of these candidates, if they go out on their own, rather than not be elected, have lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
They're all
And
strong people.
yeah, and some have just been on for a long time and they're getting a little older, so they just
Mhm.
figured, I don't know if I have it in me anymore. And also the nature of campaigning. Hopefully we'll see, because
Oh, yeah. Well,
campaigning in the COVID-y kind of world, which maybe it will be receding by then, and maybe
I don't
we'll
know. Yeah, I
start to
think so.
see
Yeah.
after Labor Day, it'll start to seem normal again, and we'll see. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
Yeah.
Though it's still unknown whether the state will allow early voting.
Oh,
And
right. That's
there
right.
are some potential changes. They actually put a caveat in the election calendar from the Election Commission saying, based on state laws, there could be some changes to these
Interesting.
deadlines and
Yeah.
whatever. So stay tuned. So we don't know yet everything, how it's all going to play, and we don't know what the field of candidates are yet. But it's
Okay.
now is the time where if somebody's thinking about it, you're
Yeah.
going to start hearing about it. And
Okay.
if you don't, then I'll be a little
All
surprised.
right. All right.
Anyway, we got another, a minute or
We have a
something
minute
here.
left. We have a minute left.
I have been personally asked to meet with
Yes.
at
Oh,
least 4 candidates,
okay.
who are not incumbents.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to evade them.
Meet
It's
with
just
them
that
over Zoom or over coffee,
it
distantly?
could be
What do you mean?
both. I
Okay.
believe I'll be meeting with one person in person on Friday.
Good.
But there are 3 others who have asked, but I just was too busy and I
Yeah.
didn't even get back to them, but I will. And there's one person I already met in person,
Mhm.
so I don't know. Why do they come to me? What do I know?
If
This
well,
stuff,
you have
right?
the candidate pages, which is wonderful. I think you
Well,
provide a great service that way, but
I mean, I think I can also kind of advise a new
yeah,
candidate as
right.
to
Good.
what to expect
As
and
long
what
as they don't
they
come on the
shouldn't do.
show, because I don't want to do any
Yeah, I don't
politics
really
on
want
the
to do it
show.
either.
No,
So
no, no.
anyway,
All right. So we'll
it's
see you our third Thursday. It's right.
yeah, we'll be back in a couple
I'm not
weeks.
Thursday, Tuesday. Sorry.
Yep. See you then on Cambridge Inside Out.
Bye.